Today I want to talk a little bit about vintage knitting for Barbie. Now, this is really a personal experience, but it's a wonderful thing to do now also. When I was young, I had Barbies at a very young age, and I would get the canisters, the knitting kits, for Christmas. And I have three. Two are identical. They're the red and white skating outfit, the first two. The third one is for the pillbox hat and coat. And then after that, as I got older, I got the other canisters, including a black one, which is in the back there. So as far as I know, these are the types of canisters that come. The black one is just like the purple ones. And what you get in the canister, typically, starting with the vintage ones, each of the vintage ones is labeled with what's in there. So the first two canisters there say two-piece skating outfit, which is really the red and white sweater. I mean the white sweater with the red pants. So you would get the pattern for the outfit, a pair of needles, and the yarn. Now, one thing that I had been looking for extra copies of the patterns online, and there's somebody had a copy on Ravelry just for informational purposes, and she said all she had was the pattern. It doesn't state the needle size. She would assume it's a size 6. Well, the first thing you need to know about the original Barbie sets is that they included size 10 needles. Size 10. And worsted weight, mainly wool, worsted weight wool and size 10 needles. And what it gives you for a Barbie clothes is big, bulky knitting. This is the sweater. Now, one of the, I don't know why they did it this way. These are the pants. I followed the pattern correctly. And they have you, you knit 2 flat pieces and sew them together. And that is one of the huge advantages of Barbie knitting. It's flat knitting. And by the age of 7, I was flat knitting. Flat needle, straight needle knitting. Because of Barbie. Now, I've looked for current things, and I don't see anything. I do see a knitting machine, but, you know, that's like an automatic knitting Nancy thing. But anyway, these pants, I don't know why they did it this way. They're her skinny pants, and you start at the bottom, and you do 4 stitches in ribbing, and then increase a couple of times as you knit the piece. And they're not the greatest looking, even if you take care with them. So you should be aware of that. I think what they were trying to do is teach children the basic stitches of knitting. And so the first 2 sets there are the is it skating or skiing? I think it's skating outfit. Whoa! Well, let's just look. Skating. And maybe this one has something in there. I put size 10 needles in that one. These were put out by Miner Industries, M-I-N-E-R. Let's find a pair of original needles. Sorry for the camera work. They came in white, but this set has a blue pair. They're plastic, size 10s, and along the top here they'll say Miner Industries. They come, that's the first set I've seen in blue. The other two or three of those sets have white ones in them. So you get these needles. These are what the vintage yarns kind of look like. The red pants weren't always red. And this is like a DK weight wool in an orangey red. Now, Lion Brand Woolies is similar if you want to do it in wool. This is the original gold wool. And this is the original white wool. But what I did was I came up with a replacement acrylics that you can purchase today, so that if you do find a canister, you need the pattern, size 10 needles, and you can use these yarns. These are Red Heart Super Saver yarns. They're made in the United States. The white is called Aran. The red is Cherry Red. This is an original, my mother made this. This is the original aqua wool, hat and coat. And a very close match in color is Red Heart Turquoise. It's very close in color. Then this is gold, Red Heart Gold, which is fairly close in color to the original. And then you have black, and then the skirt is done in turquoise again. There are a total of 4 patterns as far as I know. The skating outfit, the coat and hat, the gold dress with a stole and a belt, and then the black shirt and blue or turquoise skirt. Now, this is done according to their pattern on size 10 needles with actually vintage black wool, and it's oversized. Their photograph on the canister shows it very tight, but what I wanted to do was do the whole thing in the original needles to see how they came out. Now, how they fit is big and bulky. They fit big and bulky. They are not tight knitting. They are, however, a wonderful way to make small items very quickly using foundation knitting techniques and stitches. All of it is very easy to do, and if you find a canister, there's someone selling one on eBay. They want like $130. That would be the high end of finding a canister. Most of them run between, say, 30 and 50. Now, the first 5 there, those 6 that are, those are mine. I just recently bought this one, and this one is actually, I got this for $15. Now, when you're done with the Barbie knitting, these are wonderful yarn containers or needle containers. So what I had done when I was a kid, and what my mother, what the two of us had done, my Barbie, and this is a vintage bubble cut Barbie, we would make the outfit, move the Barbie to the next canister, make the outfit, move the Barbie to the next canister. And so by, I forget how old I was, by the 5th canister, I had all the patterns, and I have since put in extra needles in case I want to change the gauge on some of the patterns. These are the other original needles, these white. So this is technically my Barbie canister knitting. I have a photocopy of each of the patterns in there, some extra needles, some original yarns left over, and I actually also kept a Knitting Nancy in there. And when I had little bits of yarn left over, I would make Barbie scarves with a Knitting Nancy. But you don't have to go to all this trouble to recreate this. What you can do, this is why I found the acrylic colors to match. on eBay, you can get this canister. It's made of netting, nylon. This is the Red Heart Super Saver Aran acrylic. It holds a skein of yarn. Same size as the Barbie containers, the plastic ones. It's a little bit taller than the cardboard earlier ones. $10.99 on Amazon, comes in different colors. So you can set this up for someone you know with all current things. But you would still need some kind of a basic pattern. So originally, excuse me, each canister came with basic instructions, which is really telling you how to knit, purl, cast on. That's the first one. And they printed these in color, I think, on purpose so people didn't just photocopy them. Then there is the skating outfit. Very easy to make all of these. The coat is on yellow. I have a couple of copies of that. The gold dress is on green. And then the last one is the skirt and top. And see how that fits her tightly? So what I think, I had the size 10 needles with everything. I guess there's a possibility that the canister that was for the skirt and top actually had maybe size 6 needles in there as well. I made the skirt on size 10s and it fits the way it's supposed to. So it's just the top is oversized, but what I did was tuck it in the skirt and you get the same look. So I don't know if their practice knitters, you know, use different size needles than what was included in the kit. I don't know. So there are the patterns, and in a moment I'll also show you something that you can do with someone else's patterns if you can't get the vintage patterns. The patterns themselves are hard to find. You have to kind of buy a canister and hope they have a pattern. You know, I guess at some point I could try to find the other early canisters for the outfits, but I'm not really worried about it. I had these purple ones in the 70s. I used to sling them on my bike, and I was going to be a Barbie knitter forever. But anyway, you can get modern acrylic colors, and using their gauge of size 10 with worsted weight, this is acrylic and not the original wool, and they do fit her. So it really is size 10 needles and worsted weight. And the only one that is looks oversized is the black top. But now this is a 64 bubble cut, 1964 bubble cut. She's actually a little bit taller than some of the other dolls. So, but they show different dolls on the canister. They have a ponytail. They have a blonde bubble cut, I think. But anyway, it's a great thing to still do for a daughter, granddaughter. You could set up a Ken set for a boy. And you have basic patterns, which I'll get into in 1 minute, with different patterns that can include Ken. She's fine, but she doesn't want me out of her sight, and I think this is another side effect of the anesthesia. She follows me anywhere anyway, but if I get up to go out there and make a cup of tea, normally she would wait in here until I come back. Now she follows me out there, sits right with me while I make the tea. So anyway, this was one of the things, the projects that I was going to do, is some Barbie knitting. if the dog needed to just lie quietly for a while. Now, in a moment, I'm going to also show you spool knitting and, well, loom knitting and how Mattel brought that into Barbie. Now, before I move on to the loom knitting, this is a wonderful, I just found this by accident, really. I bought this on eBay. I got it at a very good price, and there are all kinds of brands now where you can grab a set like this for yourself. Straight needle set that goes from 1 to, this one goes to 13. Some of them might go to 15, or 2 to 15, but this one has size 10.5s and 10s. So it goes up to 13 and size 1s. This is a vintage Susan Bates. I have to figure out the name on these. I thought they were Quicksilver, but I have another set of Quicksilver in their original case, and that Quicksilver is plastic. There's also Silva Loom by Susan Bates. Those are plastic. These are like the Aero, A-E-R-O, British needles. They're aluminum covered. One advertising thing I saw says it's got, they call it silk-on coating, but they're aluminum that are covered with like a plastic coating. They're wonderful needles to use, and if you put together a set like this, I'm really a boy knitting needle person, like completely. I have Susan Bates. I have a couple of Hero needles, but mainly I have boy knitting needles, and I did like the Aero needles, and when I saw this I figured, well, I'll try the Susan Bates. They're very nice to knit with. I'm making a scarf with them right now, but you have a case like this, or any kind of a case with a set of needles, and that's all you need for Barbie knitting. You don't have to look for the original needles or anything like that. Boy, I don't think boy came... I have boy sets in almost the same case, so I don't know if the case was like a popular case in the 60s and both brands used the case. My mother only used boy needles, and when I inherited my mother's needles, hers are... all of her boy needles are in a case like this, the 14-inch. And then I have 2 sets of boys in 14-inch. And then this Susan Bates is in, they're longer than 10-inch. I don't have a ruler right here. They might be like 12-inch needles, so they're kind of an odd size, but they're wonderful needles, and so that's all you would need. Or you can just pick up a pair of size 10 single point needles and do all the vintage. Now in the 80s, Mattel did this Barbie glitter knitting kit. I don't think they had one of those or anything like that in the 80s. I think the purple canisters ended in like the late 70s, but I could be wrong. This is an 18 peg loom, and they're wonderful to grab. If you see this, even if you... an 18 peg loom is hard to find. And then they gave you a spool knitter with 6 pegs. And the reason they put 6 pegs on instead of 4, like a regular Knitting Nancy, is because the spool knitter is for gloves and in some cases socks. Now this is a hat made on the big knitter. So again, they're still, probably because this is targeted at children, they're still going with big bulky knitting. This is again worsted weight yarn, but I have the dress. Let me just grab the doll. This poor doll, in the 80s, they went to different joints on the dolls and her legs are broken. Her knees. She actually has a a wheelchair so that disabled dolls are not left out. And I think Mattel came out with Becky, who is in a wheelchair, but I bought the wheelchair for Barbie because her legs are broken. But anyway, here is a spool knit dress and spool knit gloves, just following their patterns. And the hat does fit her. If I try to put it on her right now with one hand, she's going to fall over. It does fit her. It's big and bulky. And again, you get this marketing idea from Mattel where they wanted children, boys or girls, to have simple ways of making their own clothes for Barbie, which is such a far, far cry from the Silkstones. And I had 2 of those, and I actually ended up reselling them because they feel so breakable. I also have a solid body early ponytail. Mine, all of her hair was cut off, but that was a different feel. And I think when they came out with the Silkstones, they tried to imitate that original solid body. And the Silkstones are so fragile, I was afraid, you know, I mean, I have a bed set up to take care of the dog. This is where I'm making this video. This is where I'm knitting. Silkstone falls off the bed and goes on the floor, and that's it. She's missing an arm. So, it wasn't my type of Barbie. Let's just put it that way. So, anyway, this is an 80s Barbie when their face mold was completely different. Very, very easy to make a dress like this. And this is how they brought loom knitting into Barbie. But not an overly well-made loom. It's plastic. I guess I brought when there's also knitting jennies, which are flat looms like knitting boards, which I broke because they're made out of plastic. But in this case, you just have to not knit too tightly. Like, I wouldn't use hand spun on this unless I was going to do completely E-wrap and knit very loosely. If you tried to do flat stitch with hand spun, you'd end up breaking a peg. Same thing with the spool knitter. A little bit stronger plastic on the pegs. So that's originally, those came out in 1962. This is 1980. So in 20 years, that's how Barbie knitting changed. And like I said, the only thing I can find now modern is a crank spool knitter, a knitting machine. That, I think I also had one of those like in the 70s. This is why the vintage knitting sets, out of all of them, are probably the best. Because they teach you, they start with size 10 needles. But, for example, so I went through and I made the original outfit. And the black top, to me, seems oversized. Anyone will then say, well, wait a minute, what if I make it on a size 6? Or a size 7? What if I do it this way? And that's the creativity that a Barbie canister, some wool, some straight needles, and a pattern. Now, let's say all you can find is the Nikki Epstein book. That's fine because she uses, I think, a lot of size 3s. I'd have to go through it again. My outfit for my Barbie that I came up with, those are on size 3s. And I actually came up with that because I was making them for 18-inch dolls, and I just sized a pattern down for Barbie. You know, at that point in 2006, I was coming up with patterns for quite a few of the different dolls. But this is what Mattel did. That one, the vintage ones are Minor Industries. Now this Barbie, even though it's an 80s Barbie, she can wear those clothes. So the knitting is what lasts. The Barbies change, but the knitting lasts. Now this is usually in a box. I think by the 80s everything was made in China. Sparkle yarn. I'm just looking to see if there's a manufacturer. I don't think so. I don't think I had enough of the box left. So get out your needles or your looms. Find someone who needs a Barbie and make some clothes.